We now go to Mr. Dana Rohrabacher of California.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and again, thank you for your service to our country. You work very hard for us, and while we have some disagreements, policy disagreements, you have our respect and our gratitude. So first of all, let me mention then some of these issues that we may have disagreement on. When you say that the decision will be made very, very soon to act on the idea of whether Christians and Yazidis are targets of genocide, let me just note, this has been going on. We've been seeing this now for well over a year, of probably several years now, of the slaughter of Christians in the Middle East. And for us to not have made a decision, and that we're making the decision, but that decision hasn't been made yet, is unacceptable. We're talking about the lives of tens of thousands of people who are being brutally slaughtered, targeted for genocide. I have a bill, H.R. 4017, and the President has commented that it would just be giving preference to Christians. Is it preference to give, is it wrong to give preference to people who are targets of genocide and say we're going to save them, realizing that they are the ones who are most likely to be slaughtered?
No, this decision has to be made strictly, and it has to be, and I understand that. But I think I only had the first discussion come to my desk on this in terms of the legal interpretations a couple of weeks ago, and that's when I immediately initiated some reevaluation, which I'm looking at. And I can tell you I want to do this as quickly as I can.
Well, let me just suggest that having this come to your attention only weeks ago.
Well, it has to go through. It requires, Congressman, it does require a lot of fact gathering. I mean, you have to get the facts from the ground, more than just anecdotal.
Mr. Secretary, the whole world knows that Christians are being slaughtered in the Middle East. It's clear. It's time for America to act, and the excuse that we've got to study it, we've got to ask the lawyers what the wording is this really preference or not, it's unacceptable. And I would hope that your word that is going to be acted on very soon, we're going to hold you to that. So second, about the idea here, do you agree with some of the administration officials that claim that Russia is a greater threat to our national security than is radical Islamic terrorism?
I think, I don't want to get into a sort of either or here because I don't think it's necessary. I think that what the Defense Department and others have been saying is that they see activities that Russia is engaged in which present challenges. For instance, what happened with Crimea, what happens in the Donbass, what's happened in support for the separatists, the long process of back and forth on Minsk implementation is interpreted by the frontline states as a threat. And there's engagement by Russia through its propaganda, through operatives in some of these other countries. So it is perceived of as engaging in activities that are threatening. Let me just finish. I believe if you wanted me to put on the table the threat to the United States today in terms of day-to-day life and the stability of the world, it is violent extremism, radical religious extremism, and the violence of...
Are you unable to say radical Islamic terrorism, as our president is unable to say?
I think you just heard me say radical religious extremism.
No, you didn't say radical.
It's not always exclusively
You don't want to say
Islamic.
Radical Islamic.
It is predominantly Islamic.
It is disheartening when a representative of our government can't say radical Islamic terrorism, and at the same time can't make a decision whether Christians are being targeted for genocide. Well, this is not acceptable. What about your point on Russia and whether or not we consider them the greatest threat over radical Islamic terrorism? Let me just note that increasing the spending of our military spending in Europe so that we'll now have more tanks in Europe could be taken as a hostile act by Russia as well. It's time for us to get out of this cycle of, well, we're going to find things that that they're doing that we consider hostile, and vice versa. We have every reason, do we not, Mr. Secretary, of trying to find a way we can work with Russia to combat what is the real threat, which is radical Islamic terrorism.
Congressman, I think you heard me say that it is predominantly predominantly Islamic, and I have no hesitation in saying that. And I've said that in many parts of the world. That's not the issue. And yes, we are trying to cooperate with Russia with respect to this issue in Syria right now. Russia is the co-chair with us of the International Syria Support Group and of the Cessation of Hostilities Task Force. And we are working very closely on the Countering Violent Extremism Initiative, which President Obama has led in the UN and elsewhere in convening people to work against violent extremism on a global basis. To me, this is the greatest challenge we face because there are hundreds of millions of young people in many of these countries where you have 60 to 70% of the nation under the age of 35, and if they don't have jobs and if they are not educated and there is not opportunity, or we don't keep radical religious extremists of any kind from reaching them and turning them into a suicide bomber or an extreme operative of one kind, we have a problem, all of us. So this is, to me, the more prevalent challenge that we all face, and Russia shares an interest in working with us to deal with that.